Hello, the one and only Xylophoney here with a bunch of dossiers from ARK Scorched Earth. I used to do videos on these, looking at every single dossier before they came up, but I missed quite a few as you can probably imagine. If you want to check out some of the ones I've done before, feel free to go back on the channel and look at them in some of the playlists, but for now, we're going to look at every single creature from Scorched Earth. So, why not start with one of the favorites of them all, the Wyvern. So Wyvern, as you can imagine, is depicted just like in this picture here. It is essentially a dragon with two legs, and instead of two front arms, it has wings. So, we're going to take a look at what it says right here. Much like its relative from the island, the Draconis Vipera that inhabit the aptly named dragon trenches are creatures straight out of European legend. In the wild, aside from their size, the main difference between Draconis Vipera and its larger cousin is that the former possesses only two legs, like an avian. Otherwise, it is quite similar, with armored scales, leathery wings, and the ability to spew projectiles from a pair of glands inside its mouth. The nature of these projectiles is tied directly to the color of the Draconis' scales. Some spit fire, while others unleash poisonous acid and bursts of bioelectricity. I can imagine that no flying mounts are more deadly than the Draconis Vipera. Its strength, toughness, and ability to rain death upon one's enemies make it unmatched in combat. The few creatures that it cannot immediately overpower, it can outmaneuver. In fact, it is puzzlingly suited for a life of servitude, despite being such a vicious predator. The ridges on its back form a natural saddle, to the point where many riders prefer to ride Draconis bareback. Curious indeed. So it seems to tell us a lot just about what a wyvern is, what it's all about, and then what it can do. So naturally, they shoot fire, they shoot poisonous acid, and bursts of bioelectricity, as you've seen from the fire, lightning, and poison wyverns. They all have different things that they can do, and those are tied directly to the color of their scales. It says, although they are super deadly, they are destined for a life of servitude, so they want to be raised, they want to be tamed. Okay, maybe not literally, but it fits them really well. So, they're very useful in combat, and when they can't fight something directly, like say they're having trouble against a rock elemental, they can just run away. They can just fly off and have no problem whatsoever. So these guys, when it comes down to combat, are one of the best possible things you could have, especially in ARK Scorched Earth. Let's take a look at the next dossier, the Thorny Dragon. Although not a dragon, this guy is, well, thorny? Let's take a look at this. It says, in the wild, though survivors have come to call these gargantuan reptiles spiny lizards, I believe that Mollusc Sagittarius' closest known relative is the Australian thorny devil. Besides the obvious gap in size, most of the differences between the Mollusc Sagittarius and its smaller relative lie in its thorns. As we can see here, it has thorns all over its body. Very sharp, very deadly, and we'll get to what else they can do right about here. Instead of being permanent parts of its skin, Mollusc Sagittarius' thorns are more like spines or quills that can be removed and regrown. In fact, it is even capable of shooting these spines from its tail as a method of self-defense, and examination of these projectiles has revealed that they are coated in a lethal poison. Yeah, so that gives the ability where they can just shoot a bunch of spines at you from their tail. Now, of course, in nature, the accuracy of shooting spines from their tail wouldn't naturally be that accurate as they are in the game, but it's a pretty cool feature. I think when it comes to ARK Scorched Earth, they were really kind of, lenient with what abilities things could have, and I think it's really cool. Finally, it says when domesticated, despite its dangerous spines, Mollusc Sagittarius has proven an excellent mount for indirect combat. Its ranged attacks can wreak havoc in a pitched battle, particularly if other creatures are taking the enemy's attention. Just use a proper saddle, strap yourself in securely, and use extreme caution while mounting or dismounting, because you wouldn't want to try to get on your new tame and find yourself stuck by one of its quills, poisoned and dead. That would not be good. That would not be good at all. Let me know what you think of the Thorny Dragon and the Wyvern, of course, in the comments below. And of course, leave a like if this one's your favorite. But let's move on to the next one. The Moreltops. It says in the wild, Moreltops dromedarius seems to be relative of both the Morelodon and the Ceratops genuses, which in itself is rather strange. On top of that, it has developed the ability to store water in its humps like a camel. This makes it a critical part of the desert's food chain. It provides predators with both food and hydration. The Moreltops has limited options when it comes to self-defense, and I would not recommend taking one into combat. However, so long as survivors don't forget to let Moreltops stop by the well every now and then, they will find the creature an invaluable companion. So this just speaks to how these things are kind of strange that they exist, but they can carry around water. This water can, of course, really help the ecosystem. Predators go after these guys when they're thirsty, and they can just, hydrate themselves. And of course, if you tame one, you can get the water as well. It says when domesticated, survivors discovered how to tap the water into the Moreltops humps without harming it, and the docile creature became the desert's most essential pack animal. Not only can it carry a good amount of weight, but it can provide survivors with a large mobile water source that can mean the difference between life and death on any given journey. Yep, there you go. These guys are a survival method in the desert. You can have one of these around with you, tap into them with a water skin or even a canteen, and have a drink. And this is actually a pretty large source. You can fill up your water skin several times, and these guys fill their water up really quickly once you get them back to water. So it's a very useful thing to have. However, as I have personally learned, very unfortunately, and this says, they're not suited for combat. So, they will die if a rock golem attacks them. I don't know who would actually let a rock golem attack them though. Anyway, let's move on to the next one. We have the Jugbug. Almost similar to the Moreltops, they can store water, but they're much smaller and you can actually get water from them in the wild. It says here in the wild, the Scutophora pudius is a fast-flying insect that comes in two varieties, visually distinct only in the red or green markings on its exoskeleton. Biologically and behaviorally, they're practically the same. The only real difference between the two is the resource they gather on their expandable sacs on their backs. Scutophora, when green markings, gather water, and the ones with red markings gather oil. So if you find those green-blue ones out in the wild, they have water. If you find those red ones out in the wild, they have oil. This unique ability makes Scutophora a target for both the desert's natural predators and human survivors. Finding a green Scutophora at the right time could prove to be life-saving, and survivors can use Scutophora for a wide variety of purposes. When domesticated, like many of the other insects on the island, they can't be tamed. Beyond the resources obtained while hunting, the survivors will find no use for it. But there you go. As you can see, this picture here pretty much just broke off the back of one of these guys and is pouring it into an oil can. Nothing strange about that. And certainly nothing strange about what's probably about to go on up here, drinking water from a Jugbug's butt. I mean abdomen. Abdomen. It's a sack that's on its back. It's a back sack. But yeah, these guys are great for gathering oil, finding water at crucial moments. They can be found anywhere across the desert, so you don't even need to have water nearby. They're a lifesaver and a great thing to gather resources from. Moving on to... we have the cute little cuddly fluff ball known as the Jerboa. Now guys, we're not here to talk about how adorable these things are. We're not here to talk about how their big ol' ears wiggle, how their big ol' eyes stare into your soul, or any of that. We're here to talk about science. So, let's hear what the scientists have to say about this. Scientifically speaking, Rhenopilla amplexus is an adorable little fuzzball and I just want to hug it forever. Unfortunately, being harmless and lovable is inadequate as a defense mechanism in this wasteland. And that means Rhenopilla is at the bottom of the food chain. It's an easy meal for predators and survivors alike, and the latter of whom also value its hide. I don't know about you guys, but has anyone actually ever killed a Jerboa on purpose? I don't think so. They're too cute to kill. Nah, I'm sure there's some of you guys out there who are just ruthless against the cute little cuddly jerboas. Anyway, I digress. On to the next one. Rhenopilla generally fits in the Clade Guris, but it seems to share traits with both rodents and lagomorphs. While it looks similar to some species of the kangaroo mice, at first glance, it is clearly unrelated. When domesticated, in addition to being the cutest little companion in the desert, hours of close study and cuddling have taught me that the Rhenopilla is an instinctive understanding of this desert's weather patterns. When the weather is about to change, Rhenopilla will suddenly start behaving differently. So taming them does have practical uses that can justify its perch upon one's shoulder. Not that I need any justification, but I'll take whatever excuse I can get. So this is one of the better dossiers, I think. It's saying that yes, Jerboas might not have a great use in anything when it comes to the game, but they are adorable, so you should have one. That is pretty much all it is when it comes to this guy. If you want to be a cruel monster and harvest them for easy resources, then do it. If you want to have one on your shoulder for its adorable cuteness, do that, and that's the method I prefer. Anyway, on to the death worm. So death worms are pretty much the same as the Jerboa. They're adorable and useless. No, okay, let's just talk about something a little darker here, how deadly these things are. In the wild, the titanic Corcoral Arachis is commonly called a death worm by the locals, but it's only half of this that is accurate. Corcoral is in fact not a worm, so only the death part is accurate. Worms are decomposers that gain nutrients from dead and decaying materials, while Corcoral is a carnivore. The death worm spends most of its time burrowed beneath the desert sands, exploding to the surface, only to devour its prey in a single bite. The only chance of surviving a Corcoral attack is if its initial lunge misses, as it's momentarily immobile afterwards. Theoretically, that could provide a brief opportunity to escape its territory. I wouldn't count on such luck, though. So these guys are extremely deadly. They generally kill things in one nasty bite, and they're very, very territorial. You don't want to come across these guys. They are not nice. And, well, they eat things. They eat a lot of things. And the apparently locals named them after death. So, let's try to avoid these guys, shall we? But continuing on, it says they spend most of their life underground, burrowing through sand and stone. Tribes only encounter them when they encroach on its territory, at which point it unburrows and releases carnage. Fortunately, they're stationary while unburrowed, so escaping is fairly straightforward. They just pop up, wiggle around on the surface, and realize, I can't go when I'm not underground, and then they pop back down. And hopefully, you got a good distance away from them by then. It says here that attempting to tame them will almost certainly result in failure, and a very painful death. Any survivors in this desert should avoid Corcoral territory at all costs. So they're saying there's a chance, huh? They said, almost certainly. So they're saying there's a chance we could tame one of these guys? Anyway, moving on to the next one, we have the desert moth. It says here in the wild, like its smaller relatives, Limantris, Sporarmis survives by draining plants and vegetables of their nutrients. Given desolate natures of the region, that makes options rather limited, but given the desolate nature of the region, that makes options rather limited. But fortunately, its relationship with the desert's plants is symbiotic. In addition to pollinating them, the spores it releases help nourish the harsh desert plants. Okay, so these guys are like, little butterflies that go, or bees, or moths, or whatever. I don't like moths, okay, so I'm trying to pretend it's a butterfly. But anyway, they go plant to plant, spreading the pollen, and at the same time nourishing them with their spores. So it's a very good thing to have in the desert. So technically, if we had a lot more moths, the desert would have a lot more plants. So I guess be nice and don't kill the moths, but I'm probably gonna still kill the moths because they give you lots of silk. So, here it says when domesticated, Lymantria is occasionally used as a one-man flying mount, but its ability to produce silk and spores is often considered more valuable due to its slow flight speed. Its silk can be weaved into heat-dispersing cloth, and its spores gathered for fertilizer or poison. Its saving grace as a mount is that it has the ability to release the spores mid-flight, allowing it to act as a primitive bomber during sieges. So it can just release those spores even while it's flying through the air. And you could either give someone's flying mount that's attacking you a face full of spores, or watch the spores drift down below you. It says when attacked, the slow-moving Lymantria immediately takes to the air and flies almost straight up while releasing these spores. While the spores are nutritious to most plants, they are highly deadly to most other organisms. Alright, so that's the desert moth. Their spores hurt animals, and they help plants. So they're an interesting creature. You can fly on them, but they are extremely slow. Really, the main thing you want from these guys is their silk and their spores, which the silk can be made into that snazzy-looking desert cloth armor. So moving on to the fourth from the last one. Yeah, we're almost there. We're gonna finish this one up on the some of the coolest ones. So hopefully you guys are enjoying this. By the way, hit the like button if you are enjoying this, because I'm running out of breath. Anyway, next up we have the Mantis. It says here in the wild, the existence of a creature such as the Empusa disciplus is a both fascinating and frightening thing. Not only is the Empusa the only recorded insect to have developed an opposable digit, allowing it to grip objects and use tools, but it possesses a level of intelligence that is unrivaled among the non-human species. I've even found clear patterns of the sounds they make communicating with their own kind, as though they actually are using some form of dialect. I would love to study these interactions in depth, but observing Empusa up close is extremely dangerous. Its size, intelligence, and ability to pounce on prey from a great distance mean that one could be quickly swarmed and killed upon detection. Caution is recommended. So here we see that these guys have little fingers. Look at the little fingers. Hold on, look at the little fingers. They can actually hold on to weapons and tools, which is pretty impressive, especially considering they're smart enough to use those tools for their purposes. You can give them pickaxes and they will mine. You can give them swords and they will carve. It says here that when domesticated, though a dangerous task, successfully taming Empusa can be highly beneficial. Its unique claws allow it to wield melee weapons like spears or pikes into battle, and use tools while harvesting resources. This makes it deadly for a foot soldier, and highly efficient as a gatherer. So these are one of the more interesting creatures added to Scorched Earth. The Mantis, of course, looks like a giant praying mantis at first, but he has little fingers. These little fingers hold tools. These little tools give it endless possibility, and not only that, it has a high intelligence level. Now, I'm not here to break into any theories or anything, but these guys are like borderline sentient beings. You could be potentially taming them and forcing them into servitude as a slave, which technically is how you tame any dinosaur or creature. But these guys are... it's weird, man. These guys are weird, but they're really cool. So let's move on before we get too existential on ya, and go to the Vulture. Now, the Vulture in this game is pretty much exactly like you would see a Vulture in real life. Not much differences, but we're going to look at the dossier anyway. It says, in the wild, Torgos arcam appears to be a relative of the Torgos trachyleotos and Torgos negevensis, commonly called the lappet-faced vultures, which are native to the sands of the Sahara, Sahel, and Negev deserts. Like them, it's a carrion bird that feeds on decaying corpses of other animals, and it's aggressive when defending its meal. As such, survivors should take note when they see groups of Torgos circling above. That means a wounded creature or a bloody battle may be somewhere below. So these guys will circle above you just like a real vulture. Of course, if something's about to die or it's already dead, they will circle, wait for the opportune moment, and then go down and feast. Since the carnivores, when they kill something, they completely eat it in ARK, this will commonly be done with something that happens when herbivores kill something, I imagine. When a herbivore kills, say, a raptor, the body will be left there, and food for the vultures to swarm around and take. It says when domesticated, despite its impressive wingspan, it's not suitable as a pack animal, and it's surprisingly light. Some survivors have even been known to keep a Torgos arcum perched on their shoulder. Interestingly, they're capable of storing raw meat in a separate stomach, where it will decay at an accelerated rate. Once spoiled, Torgos arcum will regurgitate the meat for proper consumption. The strong stomach survivor could, in theory, utilize this feature to speedily spoil meat for recipes. Now, when it comes down to it, this is not a super useful ability. You can just take meat and separate the stacks in your inventory and it'll spoil plenty fast. But it can spoil slightly faster if you use one of these guys. Despite that being a completely gross thing that it stores it in its stomach until it spoils and then pukes it up and eats it proper. I mean, as you do. Anyway, it's a pretty cool one, but let's move on to one of the coolest ones. The Rock Elemental. It says here, the Colossus Petrum is like no creature I have ever encountered. There is no biological or historical precedent for it. Its nearest relatives exist only in legend, mythical statues that could come alive, like the Golem of Prague. That makes it even more dangerous. What survivor could possibly expect seemingly benign rock formation to suddenly spring to life and attack them? Fortunately, their massive size makes it quite slow, so I would advise most survivors to flee immediately when encountering one in the wild. So these things are straight out of legend, much like the wyverns, except while wyverns kind of seem like an animal, they're like part lizard, part bat, part anything you want to throw in there to make it make sense, the rock elementals make no sense. It's all legend, but they seem to be existent on this island, which is certainly different, but really cool at the same time. It says the rock elemental survives by slowly absorbing nearby minerals while in its dormant state, which consequently means that its body contains a wealth of metal ingots. If undisturbed, it can maintain its hibernation forever, and it'll viciously attack anyone who encroaches on its territory. A solitary creature, it lives alone and will not even protect its own kind. Aw, that's so sad. If it sees one of its buddies going down next to it, it doesn't care. It's just gonna stay in the rock sucking up those minerals. However, if you take one down, that is a whole lot of metal you can get. And I've been told they give you metal, obsidian, crystal, anything you can find in the ground are just packed into these guys, which does make a lot of sense. It says if somehow tamed, Colossus Petrum could prove to be an invaluable asset, particularly in a siege. Only armor-piercing rounds or explosives can harm it at all, and it will handily smash through stone structures. Oh, so dinosaurs can't even hurt it? That is kind of insane. I'm sure they can, but of course if you want to kill it, use some armor-piercing rounds. You want to use bullets. You want to use a machine gun. You want to use a rifle, something along those lines to take this thing down. It is pretty insanely tanky, and full of delicious materials. So, moving on to the final one we have here, is the Manticore. Now, although the boss dossiers don't really tell us much about the creature, we have seen before they have those separate attacks. They can claw and bite at you, or they can use that giant poison tail. And I'm imagining, if that giant poison tail strikes a player, you'll be dead completely instantly. Or if any of its other attacks hit you, you'll probably be dead completely instantly. So it has, it's very deadly. It flies, but it doesn't have a breath attack or anything to worry about. So if you can stay at range from this thing, you're kind of safe until it flies over to you and eats you. That's cool, right? Anyway, if this guy or any of those previous ones were your favorite, make sure you leave a like and comment which one was your favorite so I can know. Aside from that, I want to thank you guys for putting up with me through this entire video of just reading off and going over the dossiers. It does interest me quite a bit, but I am completely out of breath and my brain needs some food or something. So, hopefully you guys have all enjoyed this. You know what to do, and I will see you in the next episode of ARK Scorched Earth. Goodbye.